Hi, it's Rich Hoffman here. So I got invited to a bachelor party. I've been invited to lots of bachelor parties over the years. And of course I said no, as I always do. I don't do them, I don't go to them. And I often lose respect for people who have them. My idea of what you should be doing before your wedding, my bachelor party 37 years ago, the friends I had that were going to be in my wedding party, we all got together and watched The Empire Strikes Back. And the most crazy, risque thing that we did was we went to Kroger and got some snacks. They were like donuts and chips and things like that that we ate while we watched The Empire Strikes Back for the millionth time, I think. And a lot of people thought that was weird at the time. You know, why don't you go out and do something wild and crazy and go get a stripper, go to Vegas, do all these various things. And I've always looked down on people who did that, especially before their wedding night. That's not a good way to start a lifetime commitment with another person, to look at it as one last fling before you do the crazy thing and get serious with building a life with somebody. And bachelorette parties are worse. My wife's been invited to a few, she's gone to a few, and they've never been good. It never turned out well. It's always been something I find extremely disgraceful, and embarrassment is never far behind on the conduct that happens. And that means, you have strippers at some of these things most of the time, or they're passing around popsicles in the shape of, penises and sex objects, dildos, and everybody laughs and giggles, and grandma's sitting over there, the grandma that raised some of these little girls that are getting ready to get married. And they put on this public display of desecration before you put on a white dress and marry somebody for a very serious occasion. That's supposed to bring behind it the creation of a new family. So I think the participation in bachelor parties and bachelorette parties is horrible, should not happen, it should not be a part of our culture. And people want to know, well, why do you feel so strongly about them? Everybody does it. Most everybody, if you have some middle to upper income, likes to go to Vegas and have a big fling with a bunch of strippers, and the fiancés are okay with it because they go to some place and have strippers and do all kinds of embarrassing, crazy things, and it's a social embarrassment that everybody participates in, and all members of the family are a part of. And I find it absolutely disgusting. So why? Well, that's because if you know a little bit about history and you understand the root cause of the social behavior, then you get the psychological reason we do it is a bad reason. And I would always point to, like, a good, for instance, like the temples of Astarte and the land of Canaan. Some of the stuff they're always talking about, the kind of rituals that were so dangerous and why the Canaanites needed to be destroyed. The dedication to the fertility goddess Astarte, who was kind of a cohort of Ishtar and some of the female goddesses of the Near East religions that emerged, for which Yahweh was rebelling against and encouraging the people of Israel to rise up and conquer the sacred, that's how they saw it, the sacred rituals of prostitution was something that they were embarking on in dedication to the goddess Astarte. And every year, all women would have to take a short period of, at some point in the year, at a dedicated time, they would become prostitutes to somebody and desecrate themselves in front of everybody, and people shake their heads and say, how could that happen? How could that be? And there's some leftist scholars that want to say, well, there's no proof that happened, except for they wrote it down everywhere, and it's very common in the land of Canaan that they did this. And but normal women, people's wives, would have to offer themselves up to strangers for the sacrificial element of improving society by putting on a show for the goddess Astarte. Whether that meant bringing crops in, or bringing good luck to your household, or giving opportunity to have birth, you'd be granted a nice child because you desecrated yourself in front of a goddess, Astarte. And when you got paid for your prostitution, you got paid for your disgrace, then you would take that money and dedicate it to the Temple of Astarte. And that's how they paid for some of these ritualistic practices. And all women were participating in it. It was expected socially of them. And we still carry that guilt around, and it comes out in the way that we worship and deal with the problems of the universe. And we see all these mysterious things happening, and we want to manipulate them to our advantage. So we try to give these higher powers we think are out there and appease them with some sort of desecration. And that desecration still permeates in our current society in these rituals we do before we tie the knot with somebody in a marriage. We desecrate ourselves to show society that society is bigger than our bond with the individual. And it's another way of peeling back how when you make that marriage vow, you're letting society know that it's still bigger and that you will still sacrifice to the greater good. And they're not too big to be too haughty to not do something embarrassing in full view of all the public. So when you have your little granddaughter who's getting married, you've cared for her since she was a little kid, and you've changed her diapers and protected her through all those things while she was growing up, and she's now getting ready to marry some guy, and grandma's sitting over there holding a dildo or a dildo popsicle and licking it in front of everybody. You're letting everybody know that you're not too good for desecrating yourself in public for the greater good. That's why I don't do bachelor parties or bachelorette parties. That's why I've never been to one, and I never will be at one. And when I had to do one myself, it was The Empire Strikes Back and some donuts and chips from Kroger. That was the extent of it. And everybody that I've known personally that has been involved in these things, I think less of them after. You go to the wedding, you give them a gift and you shake their hands and wish them well, but when they've hugged up against a stripper, 40%, this is who admitted it, 40% of men are way over the top disgusting. 40% of women who go to bachelorette parties admit to doing something embarrassing or risque. And that's who admits it. It becomes that secret bond between all the women present. When you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner, you're thinking about that grandma over there in the corner who was licking that popsicle, or the guy, the stripper, that brushed his junk up against that mom you knew, that you've known since you were a little kid, and she is suddenly at the whims of society and perversion. We're worshiping essentially the same forces that Yahweh was trying to destroy in the land of Canaan, in temples like Astartes or Ishtars, these goddesses of fertility that have dominance over society and want the appeasement of the puny humans living on earth to massage their egos with grotesque embarrassments in a social context and in full view of the public. So when you're willing to desecrate yourself and say, I'm not so high and mighty that I'm willing to compromise myself and we're all going to embarrass ourselves together in these sexual practices, you're doing the same thing that the Canaanites did at the temples of Astarte, when the women of society would prostitute themselves. They might have been married for 20 years, might have been married for 10 years. They might have had children and with a nice husband, they liked him, but they would have to go desecrate themselves in public and have sex with perfect strangers, and they would be paid for that prostitution, and that money would go to the temple. And that's how they funded their religion. It's pretty bad, but knowing that is why I don't go to bachelor parties. That's why I reject the whole premise, and I always have. I've known those stories for a long time, and the older I get, the more proud I am that I've never been to them. Because it is the right thing to do, and that's to reject the premise of its cultural implementation. And it's not cute, it's not funny, it's not cute to go get drunk and smashed and let stripper guys or stripper girls desecrate you in front of your peers, so that when you show up at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner, or some family event, or you're giving birth to your child, all those same people are looking at you and saying, I remember what you did with that stripper. I remember when she was putting her boobies in your face and you were liking it. And I look at your wife sitting there in the kitchen cooking up dinner, and I kind of feel sorry for her, but it's a secret between us bros, right? And the women are doing the same thing. Remember when grandma put that dollar bill in that stripper's G-string and she touched his thing, and his thing fell out and she touched it? Remember when that happened? And so from then on, grandma has been lowered in the eyes as an individual, and she has surrendered herself to the social context. And that's why it's such a bad thing. That's why it's so dangerous, and that's why we shouldn't do it. And that's why bachelor parties and bachelorette parties are so devastating to our culture, and that's why I never go. So thanks for the invite. I get invited to these things 5-6 times a year, and I never go, and people kind of shake their heads and think I'm being antisocial. And it's not that I don't want to talk to people. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to be in a place where that's going on. It's something I've warned against all of my life. And the more older I get, the more resolute I am in rejecting the premise, because it is essentially wrapping their arms around the Temple of Ishtar and Astarte and ritualistic prostitution that would sacrifice in personal integrity to the whims of social context for the benefit of all. And that's not how we have built our society, especially in America. And I think it's a terrible practice that needs to be completely rejected going forward by the human race. And I will always speak out against it. You'll never get me to say that's a good thing for anybody, because it's not. Not a good way to start a marriage. And Rich Hoffman here. Share, subscribe, make tomorrow a better day. If you haven't read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day. See you later.